So we'll move on to testing. So first of all, we've got the ATCG schema to talk about. We've got just a very small little thing about Windows ID, which I'll talk about what that is once we come to it. And then once we get to unit test improvements, you're going to get the pleasure of being talked to by Matt, who's going to tell you about what improvements we've made to the Jade test case class. But first up, ATCG. So in this little section, I'm going to talk about what ATCG is for those of you who aren't familiar with it. I'm going to talk a little bit about how it works. Can give you a little bit of a demo just so you can see it in action, see what it'll actually do for you, and then I'm going to let you know where you can grab a copy. So, what is ATCG? This is a tool that we've actually been using internally for quite some time, and we're now releasing to all of you who want it. It stands for Automatic Test Code Generator, so it's automatic, so we're going to have some test automation happening. Spark testing, of course. And it's a code generator. What it's used for is to have automatic testing of Jade forms. So where you might use unit tests to test Jade methods, you'd use ATCG to test your GUIs, your Jade forms, in an automatic way, which is really nice. So how's that actually going to work? So what happens is ATCG will record you as you pilot your way through your form, and it's just going to watch you and record everything that you do as you're clicking through, and it's going to generate some Jade code. That's the Jade code that would replicate those actions. Once you've finished recording and you've got your test saved, you can use ATCG to replay the exact same actions as you performed any number of times. All of the generated code is going to be Jade code, so you can actually, dig into the source that it's produced and edit it if you like. So, for example, if you've done a really long recording and then actually you just want to change one little thing halfway through, you don't need to re-record everything. It might actually be easier just to pop into the code and just tweak the one little thing you wanted to change. An important thing to know is while you're actually replaying, ATCG is going to check the state and make sure that everything on the form is as it should be. So it's going to actually test things and throw up your errors if you get an unexpected message box or something like that. It's not just going to blindly click on the buttons, it'll also verify as it goes. So let's actually have a little bit of a look and see what it looks like if you're replaying a test. So here we have the error 1 system, and hands off, I'm not actually doing anything. You'll see I've just put a little bit of delay, so it's doing each step a couple of seconds. It's typing in some stuff. It's clicking on some buttons. You can see on the left, this is just the log, just showing exactly what commands it's doing. And it's piloting the error 1 system without me doing anything. As I mentioned, it's got a couple of seconds delay between each click. That's just simply app.do Windows events. You can have this going faster than the eye could see, but obviously that wouldn't be as good for a demo, so I've just put a 2-second delay between each step. Cool, and you'll see that looks like everything succeeded. Wonderful, so it clicked on all of the buttons and it verified that nothing had broken as it did its little replay through. So that was just the one that I had recorded earlier. You can record it, of course, to do whatever you would like on your forms. Now, hopefully you're all sold on ATCG being awesome. If you are and you want to grab a copy, so we've got it available on the Jade Software NZ public GitHub. I'll get into more about this GitHub a little bit later on, but for now it's just at github.com/jadesoftwarenz/jadeatcg. We've got a repository that's got the ATCG schemas in it, and it's also got all of the instructions you'll need to get started with it. So you've got some documentation on both how to actually grab how to grab it off GitHub. If you're not familiar with the Git technology, we've got some instructions there, and also how to actually get it set up and get it working with your Jade forms. So all of the documentation is included with some links to further documentation just if you want even more detailed instructions.
How hard is it to set that up for an existing system?
I'd say pretty easy. It may depend a little bit on like how complex your system is, I guess. But essentially what happens is you take your ATCG schemas, you just make them as sub-schemas of the system you've got, and then you can run this little app where you press the record button and then it opens up your form and you click through and then you click save, and then you've got this little file that you can play any number of times. There's a little bit of config and setting up, but it walks you through how to do that. And we've also got a demonstration with it being included in the L1 system. So there's kind of two versions. There's one where it's the default blank slate sort of version you can put on your system. We've got an L1 system where it's already customized for L1, so just so that you can see, this is one already set up for you, so you can have a nosy, and here's the blank one that you can put on your system and instructions on how to do it. Yeah.
How much can you customize the validations in these cases or the assertions?
Pretty much lots, I would put it as. So there are a couple of things that you can't access, but basically anything that you could access programmatically, you can access from ATCG. So you can look at any of the values of any of the controls. You can look at basically any of the values on any of the controls on the form at any step in the process, and you can verify that they're what you expect. There's also there's one kind of consideration, I guess, with regards to timestamps and things. So it will try and be a little bit clever. If you've got something like a clock down the bottom, right, then obviously that's going to be different every time you run it. So it's a little bit clever about trying to figure out if something's actually a time rather than anything else, so that it doesn't false validate on that. In the instructions, it's got a little bit more on, how to deal with that. But yeah, does that answer your question? Yeah, pretty much everything. Cool. Now, before we throw you over to Matt, I mentioned the Windows ID. So this is for if you're using a third-party tool to do your GUI testing. So this would essentially be some other tool that does the same job as ATCG. Then of course you're going to need to be able to click on your buttons and interact with your controls, which means you need to uniquely identify them. We've got this new get control window ID method on the control class. What that's going to do is it's going to return you a number that represents the control that is unique, so it's going to be different for every control, and it's going to persist between things like control renames. So you can change any property you want on the control, you can even change the name of the control itself, and it will still have the same Windows ID. So if you're using a third-party tool, you'll probably need to use that method to get the ID numbers that you'll need so that those third-party tools can find your controls and interact with them. Yeah.
What about the controls renamed by one?
Sorry, repeat the question.
If your control is renamed via deployment.
The control ID is based on the hierarchy, the level of the hierarchy you're down, and the instance of the property associated with the control. So when I say instance, the property is the property number. So it uses that to create the unique ID. So if you move that control around in the hierarchy, then no, but it's not going to be retained. But otherwise, it's going to depend on being the same hierarchical description across the various installations. So if that's not true, then you could get differences.
The question was whether if you rename it, was it?
Yeah, so
It stays the same if you rename it.
Sure.
if you rename the control in a development environment and then you extract the form and deploy it, the original control will just get deleted deleted and a new one created.
Yes, that is true. That is true.
This is. So that's if you're wanting to, are you talking about if you wanted to record a test in like development and then put it in production and then do the test on the production as well? The same one?
If our testing teams are using tools in test environments and someone changes a form or renames control, or is it a greatly test?
If it's using, if you're using a third-party tool and you're using the Windows Control ID, because it's going to be set up when the control is created, and as long as the control hasn't been actually deleted and re-put in, it will be the same. But if you are switching environments and as part of that you have to delete and re-put it in, then it won't be the same control.
Yeah, so it's not system will be doing control rename.
Yeah. Now, with that, over to you, Matt. So big thanks to Matt, who's going to talk about the improvements to the Jade test case. Just.
Cool. Right, g'day everyone. So there's been some improvements in the unit test framework. So in 2018 we've added some new progress counters and the ability to change the font size in the unit test runner GUI. We log the call stack by default in batch unit test mode now. We also have the ability to profile unit tests in both the GUI and the batch runner, as well as we've had a slight change to the unit test method options. So with the GUI we've added failed asserts, passed asserts, and unhandled exception counts. And these differ from the failed and passed counts, which basically only get incremented once per method, whereas these are obviously per assert or exception. So with the unit test GUI runner, you can now increase and decrease the font size in a similar way to the Jade monitor, so either by the drop-down menu, the view menu, otherwise Control 1, Control 2 will increase and decrease it, and this also gets stored in your ini file, so it will persist. So call stack logging in batch mode on an exception or failed assert will now get logged by default. This can be turned off by adding the log call stack equals false option to the XML control file. So now I have the ability to profile, method profile in both batch and GUI versions of the unit test runner. So in the runner, it's performed in a similar way to code coverage. So to activate it, you go to the drop-down menu and select profile, then run the one or more tests that you wish to profile, and then select report profile to output the results. These results will get output to the results file value of your Jade profile section in your ini file. And to enable this in batch mode, you can add profile equals true parameter to either the command line at parameters list or the options section of your Jade, your XML control file. So in 2016, we also noticed some issues around the unit test before all, after all flag method flags, in which depending what classes you executed in a particular schema, if you had more than one of these methods within that schema, it could change which one was executed. So this was never intended. The intent was that per schema, when you ran any number of tests from any class, it would execute a unit test before all once beforehand and a unit test after all once afterwards. So to make this accurate, these options can only be added to the base Jade test class in a particular schema, and any methods on subclasses of these options would be ignored, and a warning is logged. If one or more of these methods is added to the base Jade test class, the first occurrence that's found will be executed, and it will log a warning for the others. But you should only really have one of these defined per schema.